Like, let me just translate in a summary manner. So पहले क्वेश्चन का जवाब ये था कि हाँ, हिस्ट्री में बहुत इस किस्म के टायरेंट्स आए हैं और बहुत इस किस्म के पागल लोग आए हैं, लेकिन जो मोहम्मद था वो वन ऑफ उनमें से था, चंद एक उसमें से कि मोहम्मद जैसा शायद ही कोई होगा जिसके इतने ज्यादा फॉलोअर बन गए, क्योंकि उसने आइडियोलॉजी के साथ साथ आपको एक दीन भी दे दिया, और उसने इस दीन को जो है ना जोड़ भी दिया बहुत तरीके से, और फिर उसने तलवार के जोर के ऊपर शुरू शुरू में अपने बहुत सारे फॉलोअर्स भी बना लिए, तो इस वजह से उसकी सबसे ज्यादा फॉलोइंग होगी। और अगर इस्लाम का फ्यूचर देखो तो इस्लाम का फ्यूचर काफी अंधेरा वाला नजर आ रहा है, क्योंकि अभी तो ये शुरू किया है हम लोगों ने। डेविड के मुताबिक अगर अभी से 10-15 साल पहले आपने कभी अपोस्टेट का नाम ही नहीं सुना होगा, आपने कभी मुर्तद का नाम नहीं सुना होगा, और सडनली अगर आप कुछ अरसे में देखें 8-10 सालों के अंदर आपको अपोस्टेट्स और मुर्तद दे दरादर नजर आ रहे हैं, और लोग आके सामने आके बोल रहे हैं। पहले अगर कोई मुर्तद होता भी था तो सामने आके बोलता नहीं था। अब मुर्तद आते हैं और इस टेक्नोलॉजी के दौर में वो दुनिया को दिखा रहे हैं कि इस्लाम में प्रॉब्लम्स क्या हैं, और वो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता छोड़ रहे हैं इस्लाम को। और ये अगर मजीद 10-15 साल चलता रहा ऐसे ही, तो इसका इस्लाम का फ्यूचर काफी गलत हो रहा है, और खैर से बहुत अच्छे तरीके से बहुत जल्दी इसका क्रियाक्रम भी होएगा। Why Islamic scholars try to defend this is like once again इसका ऑलरेडी आंसर दे दिया कि उनकी मजबूरी है कि उनके पास और कोई हल नहीं है, और उनको इसके ऊपर बस डिफेंड करना है, दैट्स देयर मजबूरी। By the way, David, one more thing. When I first heard about the first murtad that I ever saw was Nabil Qureshi,
Hmm.
like ever in my life. And sorry, you were about to say something.
Oh no, I just wanted to add something when you're done. Go ahead.
So the first time I heard about him, I saw his interview, which was on stage where he gave like a 1 hour kind of a presentation of from Allah to Jesus. That was his interview that I actually saw, and he told about certain things, and I was like, no way, like no way, like literally no way, like this is how like I my no way is going from mild tone to high tone while I was watching his video all the time. And by the end there was a guy who asked a question about him, that you are not even a Muslim, you are an Ahmadiyya. And I was like, that's why he left Islam. He was never a true Muslim. He was never a true Muslim. He was already an Ahmadiyya. But like the things that he said in it were actually Sunni Islam as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
there was like, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
So there was a doubt in my mind which I had to check and verify. And fortunately, I checked and verified. A lot of Muslims might not have, but I did, which made me research even further. Yes, brother, sorry.
Yeah, so with Nabil, yeah, they'll say, he was an Ahmadi. I notice Ahmadis believe in all 5 pillars of Islam. They believe in all 6 articles of faith. They believe in the Quran and the Sunnah. They have a different belief about end times. So Muslims will say, you're not real Muslims because you believe that someone came after Muhammad. When in reality, all Muslims are supposed to believe that someone's coming after Muhammad. They're supposed to believe in the second coming of Jesus. Ahmadis simply believe that the second coming of Jesus already occurred as Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Now, I agree that's ridiculous and silly, but the idea that, having the wrong belief about end times prophecy means that you're not a Muslim completely contradicts what Muhammad said, because according to Muhammad, if you simply recite the Shahada, you're a Muslim. And then you'll find other requirements, like believing in the 5 pillars and so on. Well, Ahmadis do all those things. So the only possible way that you could say they're just not Muslims is to go to a verse like Surah 4, verse 65, and say that anyone who has any resistance against anything Muhammad has said must not be a real Muslim, and then point out how Ahmadis in some way are getting something wrong. But if you make that the standard of who is and who isn't a Muslim, I don't know any Muslims, because you can point to any Muslim in the world. As soon as I start asking him questions about Muhammad's relationship with Aisha, about Muhammad's relationship with women, about what the Quran and Muhammad say about the authority of the Bible, every Muslim I've ever met in my life rejects things that Allah and Muhammad have said, or get things wrong about what Allah and Muhammad have said. And so basically, if Ahmadis aren't Muslims, I don't think anyone is. So that's one issue. And then the other thing is with Nabil, because you're mentioning that's the first ex-Muslim you
Yes,
heard from.
yes. Heard about.
Yeah. So back then, after Nabil became a Christian, this took over 4 years. We were having these discussions for over 4 years. And once he became a Christian and decided that he was going into apologetics, we thought it was so difficult to show a Muslim that Muhammad's a false prophet because it took years, that early on we were thinking we should focus on showing people that they shouldn't convert to Islam. So we weren't thinking early on in terms of showing Muslims that Islam is false so that they can leave Islam. We were thinking in terms of showing people that they shouldn't convert to Islam because, there were people who convert to Islam. And so that's how it was back then. We didn't think that was a serious thing you could do, going out showing Muslims that Islam is false. And fortunately we're wrong, because now people are leaving Islam all over the place.
Exactly. And that was a good thing. So let me just translate it for the people. Sorry, I'm taking double time over here because of my audience. जो सबसे पहला एक्स मुस्लिम मैंने देखा था वो नबील कुरैशी था, और वही मैंने डेविड से साथ बात की कि उसने जब अपने इस्लाम की जर्नी सारी बताई थी, तो एंड में जब एक बंदे ने सवाल किया था स्टेज के नीचे से खड़े होकर उसे, तो उसने जब अहमदिया का लफ्ज बोल दिया ना, तो वहां पे मैं कहा ले, इसको तो ये तो अहमदिया था, तो कभी सुन्नी मुस्लिम था ही नहीं, इसका तो फायदा कोई नहीं। लेकिन जो चीजें उसने बोली थी वो सारी की सारी सुन्नी इस्लाम की चीजें बोली थी। तो जो मेरे लिए अच्छी चीज हुई कि मुझे एक ठरक होती है पढ़ने की मैंने उसको वेरीफाई करना शुरू किया, तो मुझे पता लगा कि जो भी वो कह रहा था वो बिल्कुल सही कह रहा था, चाहे वो प्रॉपर मुसलमान था या नहीं था, चाहे वो अहमदिया था या नहीं था, वो उसने जो बातें कही थी वो बिल्कुल सही की थी। डेविड का जवाब इस सिलसिले में ये था कि यार अहमदिया हो या कुछ भी हो, अहमदियों का जो असल एंड में प्रॉब्लम ये आता है कि वो आखिर टाइम की जो प्रोफेसी है उसको रॉन्ग कर लेते हैं। उनके मुताबिक गुलाम मिर्जा अहमद कादियानी जो है वो ईसा के तौर पे वापस आ गया हुआ है, ठीक है, लेकिन बाकी तमाम चीजों को मानते हैं, कुरान को मानते हैं, हदीसों को मानते हैं, नमाज को मानते हैं, ज़कात को मानते हैं, रोजे को मानते हैं, हज को मानते हैं, तो बाकी तमाम चीजों को मानते हैं। तो इनफैक्ट उनकी जो बेसिक आइडियोलॉजी है इस्लाम की वो बिल्कुल ठीक है। और अगर हम किसी ना किसी एक पॉइंट के ऊपर किसी को मुसलमान ना कहें, तो फिर इस हिसाब से हर फिरका दूसरे फिरके को नॉन मुस्लिम कह रहा है, और ये हम लोग जानते हैं। हनफी किसको कह रहे हैं, देवबंदी किसको कह रहे हैं, और ये सारे लोग जो हमारे पास आते हैं जो एक दूसरे को कहते रहते हैं। इवन अगर सुन्नी और शिया मेजर ही फिरका ले लो तो शिया सुन्नियों को और सुन्नी शियों को कह रहा है, और इनके अंदर के सब फिरकों को ले लो तो सब एक दूसरे को नॉन मुस्लिम कहने के ऊपर लड़ाई कर रहे होते हैं। और इवन इंडिया और पाकिस्तान में तो सबसे ज्यादा मसला है, दैट इज वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट प्रॉब्लम। तो इस हिसाब से देखा जाए तो कोई भी मुसलमान नहीं है, ठीक है, क्योंकि हर मुसलमान दूसरे मुसलमान को गैर मुस्लिम बोलने के ऊपर तुला हुआ है। विद दैट बीइंग सेड, आगे चलते हैं। डेविड, वी हैव दिस our sister is asking again and again, it's a third or fourth message, same message. How do women support this cruel religion that makes them slaves? It is because Muhammad said women are half brain as well. In fact, I have a lot of women, I've spoken with a lot of women who, being Muslim, try to defend Islam brutally. Like so and so, that I have a woman in my channel who came in and said she's gonna personally behead me. So how would you, how can a woman basically defend this religion?
Yeah, two things. One, you can also have women who have psychological trauma when they're young, and some of them notice it's one thing for a woman to like a strong man, right? That's pretty normal, right? My wife likes the idea that I could defend her if I needed to. It's something else. It's something else for a woman to want a man who is massively controlling and dominating over her and beats her if she gets out of line. That's a woman who seems to be psychologically damaged and actually needs help, right? She would need counseling for something like that rather than getting in a bad relationship. But as far as Islam, yeah, I noticed a long time ago. So you're talking, I mean, before I was doing YouTube, we were just blogging. And when I would point out what Islam says about beating women into submission, most of the people who were defending it were Muslim women, saying that it's the only way to control emotional women. So it was Muslim women messaging me saying Well, yeah, but we're too emotional, and so our husbands, they're intellectual and rational, and they, need to beat us. And it's a last resort, but they need to beat us. And I'm just sitting here thinking, I mean, my goodness, how does this compare with Christianity, where husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, right? This is in Christianity, you are supposed to be ready to be crucified for your wife. I mean, you should be ready to be, if it came down to it and she was in trouble, and the only way to protect your wife was to be crucified for her, that's what you should do as a husband. And then I got Muslim women telling me that, we just need our husbands to beat us because we're so emotional. And think about, where did they get that? That's what Islam taught them. Islam taught them that.
Man, and I was laughing because seems like this is the same answer whether you are in the west or in the east. So the women are actually giving the same answer even in the east, that they are emotionally stupid idiot, they need beating. And
Yep.
I am amazed on that. Let me read a couple of chats. One of my dear friend, ex-Muslim Sahil, is here. He was supposed.
Adam,
Yes.
one thing I wanted to point out, there are different measures of like intelligence and so on, but women and men have the same average IQ.
And I fully
So,
agree with you on that.
yeah, so you can have, there are differences in the psychology of men and the psychology of women, but intelligence wise, we're the same.
And I fully agree. And we had a good maybe 8-9 hours of a talk with different Muslims with on ex-Muslim Sahil's channel, who is also an ex-Muslim from India, and we do a lot of live streams together. Unfortunately, he was supposed to be with me, but his Wi-Fi went down and he just cannot be here with us. Maybe some other day. With that being said, we have one more saying, David, do you have any plans to visit India?
I've been asked a lot over the years, and I've just never gotten any sort of like specific plan. So I've never actually done it. But it's interesting to me because 10 years ago, when I would be looking at statistics it's basically on YouTube, you can look at the analytics and see where people are watching your videos. And the United States would be at the top, like massively. And then UK, Canada, Australia, and then you start getting into some other places. Whereas starting probably like 5 years ago, India would usually be ranked number 2. So it'd be United States. That's where most people are watching. And then the second highest number of views were in India. And then for particular videos, sometimes India would be the number one place where people were watching certain videos. So I realized there's a massive hunger there in India to expose and refute the teachings of Muhammad, and which makes sense because it's one of the areas where there's a dividing line. So Nigeria is another one. There's Muslims in the north and there's Christians in the south, but it's one of the places where, as Islam has expanded, it eventually gets to a place where someone stops it from expanding. And so then you have Muslims on one side, non-Muslim. I mean, you have some mixing, but you have majority Muslims on one side and majority non-Muslims on the other side. But what Islam wants to do is keep pushing that line further and further. They don't care if it happens slowly or quickly. They just want to keep pushing that line further and further. And so I think, people in India recognize this because they've had to deal with it for a long time. But they recognize, it's not like other places in the world where as Islam advances, you have other places you can go, right? In India, it's like, okay, we've got this spot right here. We've got this spot. And if Islam pushes all the way down, then that's just, it's got us. It's got us. And so in India, Hindus and Christians and everyone are recognizing we do not want to be controlled by that. Whatever else happens, we do not want to be controlled by Islam. And so it's good that people are becoming interested in apologetics there and polemics and refutations of Islam there. I will. I'm sure I will eventually make a trip to India.
Oh, I will join you then at that particular time. But let me just tell you something that right now it's almost 3 a.m. in India, and we have 3,400 people watching us live even though that we are speaking in a language which is not comprehensible by everyone. But let me just translate what you said because they will be very happy to listen to what you said. So जो जवाब है वो ये डेविड ने दिया है कि जब शुरू शुरू में इसने स्टार्ट किया था तो उस टाइम पे इसके चैनल में यूएस यूके वगैरह और ये तमाम कंट्रीज थी, लेकिन पिछले 5 सालों के अंदर अंदर उसने देखा है कि इंडिया जो था वो उसके सेकंड नंबर पे आ गया था। यूएस के बाद सेकंड नंबर पे जो सबसे ज्यादा देखा जाने वाला चैनल था वो डेविड वुड का इंडिया से देखा जाने वाला चैनल था। तो विद दैट बीइंग सेड, आप लोगों को बहुत बहुत बधाई हो, और डेविड कह रहा है कि बहुत जल्द वो आएगा इंडिया, और अभी तक उसका कोई प्लान तो नहीं है लेकिन बहुत जल्द आएगा। So with that being said, David, yes, let me just tell you what you said about generically about India. Yes, Islam. Uh, India started the polemics about Islam too late, way too late. They never understood what was happening in their country until recently. There was a movement in India where all gods are one god kind of a movement, which happened right after the division of Pakistan and India. Pakistan was part of India at one time. It was taken away from India in the name of Islam. But they were all not thinking of a lot of things, and but finally they are realizing, because Islam has started to bring up Sharia. They want Sharia now, because now in certain parts, certain states, Islam is like 30% or even a little over 30% Muslims, which is causing a great, rift between them. And wherever Muslims go to one third approximately majority, man, things goes very differently. So now they are starting to realize that they need to finally stop it, otherwise they will destroy their cultures once and for all. So anyhow, we have a question from Vishnu. How valid is the book written after several hundred years later? Did it become an insecure, male appeasing, close knit community for people stay ignorant? He's talking about Quran.
Yeah, I don't understand the second part of that, but the Quran, you have, people have different perspectives on the Quran. I believe that the Quran that we have basically goes back to Muhammad, not in any sort of perfectly preserved sense. That's all nonsense. You have the same issue with the Hadith, because I mean, it's worse with the Hadith because their major collections are written 2 to 3 centuries after the events that they're reporting. So they'll criticize, the Gospels for being written a couple of decades after the time of Jesus, when their main sources on the life of their prophet are from centuries after the time of Muhammad. So you have people who question whether the Quran had anything to do with Muhammad, or whether it was much later, and so on. Yeah, I think that this goes back to Muhammad. So the issue with whether the Quran is valid is not whether it came later; it's whether Muhammad is a true prophet or a false prophet. And again, there is no one in history who is a more obvious false prophet than Muhammad. If you look at every criterion you can possibly come up with for spotting a false prophet, Muhammad had the most magnificent collection of signs that he is a false prophet of anyone ever. I mean, other people claim, hey, I'm a prophet, and they're not a prophet. And it'll be like one thing that shows you that they're not a real prophet, or they have no evidence or something like that. With Muhammad, you can go down the list of things that prove that he's a false prophet. And it's mind blowing. So yeah, for me, it's not whether, when exactly the Quran is written. It's that Muhammad's a false prophet.
Absolutely. I don't think I need to translate that. It was pretty simple English. We have another question. Can David Wood reach out to Jordan Peterson for a discussion on Islamic teaching? Why only Jordan Peterson? But brother, the question is for you.
Yeah, I'm not much of a person who reaches out to like you have Muslims doing that a lot right now, right? So the Muhammad Hijab crew and those guys, they're constantly trying to get on people's shows and podcasts, and we know why they do that, right? Because as far as the people who actually study Islam, we've examined their claims, and their claims are false. And I mentioned earlier that Islam spreads in two ways, by the sword, or it spreads in an atmosphere of ignorance where people don't know anything about Islam. And so over the past few years, the strategy of the Dawa gangs has changed so that they're trying to get on people's shows when the people don't know anything about Islam, because Jordan Peterson knows next to nothing about Islam. He acknowledges that, right? At one point he said Muhammad's a warlord and so on, but other than that, he doesn't know anything about Islam. So the Muslim Dawa gangs, they bombard people like Jordan Peterson with messages saying, you must get our guy on to discuss Islam and so on. And Jordan Peterson is interested in having conversations, so they'll get him on. And the idea of the Dawa gangs is, aha, now we can get access to a bunch of people who don't know anything about Islam, so we can fill their heads with complete lies. And so you have non-Muslims looking at that and sort of panicking, oh no, Muslims are speaking to Jordan Peterson and then reaching all his followers, and how do we get on there to show Jordan Peterson the truth about Islam? Whereas I'm just not looking at it like that. I think it's hilarious, and I think they're doing massive damage by going on and then talking about Islam on these shows, because what they're ultimately doing is making a bunch of ex-Muslims. So imagine like imagine their dream scenario. Suppose Muhammad Hijab goes on Jordan Peterson's show, and let's say people believe the lies that Hijab tells them, and then let's say 10,000 people convert. Well, studies show that over half the people who convert to Islam leave it within 2 years. So
Absolutely.
what just happened? Well, you just made a bunch of ex-Muslims there who are going to be mad that they believed your lies, and some of those are going to go on to expose those lies that you're telling. So it's really just a no-win situation. So I would like to see Jordan Peterson, talk to some people, but I'd rather have him talk to someone like the apostate prophet, someone who's actually an ex-Muslim, rather than me.
Very well said. Very well said. I would fully agree with you, brother, over here. And let me just translate a little bit so that people would understand if they have not. I think a lot of people now comprehend English because I just lost 1,000 people in the live chat because it's difficult for them to comprehend English. So, but what David said is कि यार simply कि ये जो जिन लोगों को इतना इल्म नहीं है उनके चैनल पे ये जो मीमी हिजाब जैसे लोग हैं और ये लोग जाते हैं और जाके उल्टी सीधी बातें करते हैं, उसकी वजह से उस वक्त शायद वो कुछ मुसलमान गेन कर ले, कुछ कन्वर्जन्स गेन कर ले, लेकिन 2 सालों के अंदर अंदर ही 50% से ज्यादा लोग इस्लाम छोड़ चुके होते हैं। वही वाले जो उन्होंने अभी भी किया है। क्यों? क्योंकि जब वो देखते हैं कि तो हमें तो झूठ बोला था इस बंदे ने, इस डंगर ने हमें झूठ बोला था, तो वो इस्लाम छोड़ चुके होते हैं। तो असल में उसने 50% एक्स मुस्लिम बना दिए, जो कि उनमें से कुछ लोग जो है दोबारा से अपने चैनल बनाएंगे और बोलेंगे और दिखाएंगे कि यार ये झूठ बोल रहा था और ये हमसे दगा करके गया। So this is how it is happening in the world right now. We have an Indian, David, you and Adam gathered quite a good number of Hindu fans as well, and count me in love from Bharat. All right, thank you so very much.